I woke to someone whispering my name from the dark, but when I reached for the voice, there was only the bedspread and the scent of rain, and a small folded note on my pillow that I didn't write. It read, "You were almost gone." I sat up. The house was locked. The phone was dead. Outside, the rain kept tapping a rhythm that didn't belong to any storm I'd ever heard. I need you to imagine the kind of fatigue that makes the rooms of your life feel like actors on a stage you no longer remember entering. That's where I was when I took the job checking an old overnight property, a small, isolated rental house on the edge of a coastal town nobody talked about. The clients were intermittent, a renovation crew, a seasonal landlord, paperwork I thought would pay my rent for a while. I'd done odd jobs like this before. You learn to be practical. Lock up, log a few details, sleep in one of the empty rooms, let the keys rest in your pocket until morning. Practical, boring, safe, except it started before midnight. The house had the smell of old paper and salt. I set my bag on the kitchen counter, checked the locks, and walked the rooms. Every door had a key hanging inside its lock like a tiny sacrament. The upstairs hallway had a portrait of a woman with two bright eyes. Every time I passed it, those eyes felt like they'd moved an inch. I told myself I was tired. I said it aloud, a human mantra that we can still control. And that is how I taught my voice to be an ally against the small unease creeping into my wrists. I crawled into the guest bed in room 7 with the light on and my jacket over my face. I had a voice recorder in my pocket. Old habit. I like to talk to someone when I'm alone, and I clicked it on like a line. The first sound I captured was the rain, measured and patient. Atmosphere. I told the recorder what I did every night, where I was, what I'd eaten, the locks, the time. Then I drifted. When I came back to myself, there was a note on my pillow. Who left the note on my pillow while I was asleep, and how did someone get in if the house was locked? I touched the note with the tip of my finger. The paper was ordinary, the kind you'd tear from a phone book. The handwriting was small, hurried, and oddly familiar, not mine, but like someone who'd seen my handwriting before and tried to mimic it. There was a single line, "You were almost gone." The room was cold, my breath puffed in slow clouds. The window was latched. The keys I checked were where I'd left them, in every lock. The door to the hallway clicked when I nudged it. It didn't open. I turned the recorder back on. There was nothing between the last time I remembered speaking and the present, but for the note and a smear on the pillow, faint, like an imprint of lips but not wet. The recorder had a faint interruption in its file, a blank 4 minutes and some static, but the file's timestamp didn't skip. It read continuous. Either my brain had rewritten what had really happened, or some real gap had been smoothed over. The answer, the more pragmatic answer, came when I checked the hallway clock. The hands had slid a half hour forward. My watch, which I'd set when I arrived, said the clock was 31 minutes ahead. That meant something had moved time for me, or I had slept through half an hour without memory. The key detail that made my skin tighten was this. In the corner of the hallway, by the portrait, a second note lay folded in the frame's corner, where nails met the paper backing. I hadn't noticed it on the first walk. It said, again in that same small, hurried script, "Don't believe the mirror." I rested my forehead against the frame. The portrait's eyes felt like someone watching me from inside a closed room. I had a practical explanation. Stress, a prank, a bad guest earlier. I forced myself to breathe, to name each object in the room out loud until the world aligned. Clock, keys, note, recorder, portrait. But naming a thing does not banish what it suggests. It only delays it. I should tell you what mind game meant to me then. Not puzzles on a table, not riddles in a book. Mind game became the house rearranging the rules of my memory and perception while I tried to catalog the real, physical facts. Every time I found an object, another note, a pair of gloves on the mantel, footprints on the porch that looped, but did not leave the property. The house politely offered an explanation, and then later another tiny contradiction. I tried to be normal. I made coffee. I cleaned the crumbs from a plate that wasn't mine. I went outside and muttered at the rain as if the weather could be scolded into familiarity. The town's edge was 10 minutes away by car, past a lighthouse with its light stilled like a sleeping eye. When I got back, the porch light was on. I knew I had turned it off. I knew I had not come inside. And yet the door was locked, the keys inside the locks, the table by the window set with 2 cups, steam rising as if someone had just left. I remember standing there and feeling the world split into 2. What had happened and what the house wanted me to believe had happened. They were close, like 2 voices whispering the same sentence in different accents. If someone else had been here, why were there only my footprints on the path? If not, why was there a second saucer still warm on the table? I followed the steam back into the kitchen and found the second cup empty but recently used. No fingerprints smudged the rim. The set belonged to the house, fine bone china with a chip only on the inside of one handle. The cupp's chip matched a mark on my memory. Childhood cups at my grandmother's house. I don't know why that memory surfaced then. Memory is a treacherous bridge. It can be crossed only if both banks intend you to cross. I played my recorder forward. There was a moment of static and then, for a split second, breathing that matched my own. It was not my breathing pattern. It was deeper, like someone leaning in from the other side of a closed door. After that, in the file, came my voice whispering, "Don't let it see you blink." I had not said that. The file timestamp showed the whisper occurred during the same blank segment where the earlier missing time had existed. The logical possibilities narrowed. Someone had access to my recorder. Someone had been in the house, or the recorder had been tampered with in a way that knew how to sound like me. But why the cup and the steaming tea? I took the cup to the sink and held it under the cold tap. The water pooled and ran away, leaving a faint residue of perfume at the bottom. It was floral, not like anything I wore. It smelled like a woman's powder, the old-fashioned kind you might find in a thrifted coat. I could have made an observation here and left it. Someone wore perfume. They left the cup, case closed. But the house kept pressing. The second saucer had a lipstick smear. Not full lipstick, just a thin crescent on the rim, the kind you can miss if you don't look. I set the cup down and remembered every woman in my life who'd ever used lipstick like that. I thought of exes, of strangers in bars, of the portrait upstairs and its 2 bright eyes. The house responded by rearranging the portrait so its head tilted an inch when I returned. I did not imagine that tilt. I watched it move. You learn quickly in a house that plays you to record everything. I set the recorder in the hallway, left its microphone facing the portrait, and walked to the kitchen on the pretense of tea. The house hummed. The recorder caught the hum and then silence, and then the softest sound of fabric against wood. Later, when I sped the audio, I heard a whisper so low it felt like the house breathing through the paper of the notes. "We keep what we borrow." What does that mean? The rational answer is that the house belonged to someone who thought in sentences like that. The more worrisome answer is that the house collected pieces of people, memories, voices, handwriting, and kept them like trinkets. I stayed awake after that in fits. I made lists. I put sticky notes on every door. Locked, checked, do not touch. The notes did not last. The wind took them, or the house thought to tuck them behind picture frames, or perhaps the me that walked at night collected them and hid them. For in the morning, many of the notes were folded into paper cranes on my pillow that should have taken hours to fold but were perfectly formed. Around 3 in the morning, I heard something thud on the roof. I climbed into the attic crawl space to see whether it was a loose tile. The attic smelled like the underside of the ocean, and the attic ladder groaned in an old, almost polite voice when I pulled it down. There was nothing on the roof but the seabird silhouettes and a single shoe, a men's sneaker, caked in salt and white paint. Inside the shoe was a folded photograph of me. The photograph was recent. My face in the half-light of the guest room, eyes closed, mouth slack as if in sleep. The timestamp on the back. I should not have been surprised. I could still read timestamps on paper. Read the previous evening at 11:12 p.m. My stomach dropped. I don't remember posing for that picture. I don't remember anyone being in the room to take it. The shoe had been left like a calling card, and the photograph like a proof of possession. Who took the photograph of me sleeping at 11:12 p.m., and where was I during that time? The house offered me two truths, a trail and a mirror. The trail was the photograph. The mirror was literal, a full-length mirror in the downstairs hallway that, when I stared into it, showed my reflection a second out of sync, my mouth moving where my eyes had just blinked. Images are cunning. They can lie by delaying the body's parts like a cassette tape with a skip. I reached toward the mirror and my hand met cool glass. My reflection did not reach. It smiled, just an inch too late, and then raised its hand. I wanted to break the mirror then, to shatter the distance between me and whatever image it held. But violence in these places always feels like yielding to the house's ritual. So I took the photograph from the shoe and held it beneath the hallway mirror. Side by side, they looked like a before and an after. Me asleep in the photo, me awake in the reflection. But the photo had something the mirror did not. A narrow strip of wallpaper visible behind my head with a floral pattern I had never seen in the house. Back in room 7, I found that same floral strip behind the headboard, as if someone had pasted a memory into the wall. I peeled it back like a bandage and found a cavity the size of a palm. Inside the cavity was a small clockwork toy, a music box ballerina that had stopped mid-spin. When I wound it, the ballerina turned and the sound was wrong. It played a lullaby, but every third note dropped. The tune matched the rhythm of my own heartbeat in the recorder file where static had lived. The answer arrived as a slow, monstrous logic. Someone, or something, had been in the room with me at 11:12 p.m. It had taken my photograph and left behind traces of itself that looked like me but were off by a breath, a beat, a note. I couldn't call it a person anymore. Person implies consistency. This was a presence that borrowed the familiar and returned a counterfeit. By dawn, my skin had that thin, filmy feeling you get after a fever. I walked through the rooms cataloging everything I could. Every surface had an item that belonged to someone else. A child's rubber duck in the bathroom sink, a woman. A scarf wound inside the cabinet, a newspaper clipping from a town 3 states away, pinned to the pantry door. The items were not random. They fit patterns. Dates, times, a sequence like a map. I followed the map, because in a house that keeps things you follow the clues, and they led to the basement door. I hadn't been in the basement yet. The basement smelled of old film and iron. The stairs creaked, a warning I should have heeded. At the bottom of the stairs, the light bulb flickered like a tired eyelid. Pinned to the wall at the foot of the stairs was a list. The paper was brittle and yellow with a heading in block letters, checklist returns. Underneath were names and dates and small notations like taken, borrowed, returned. My name, written in the same small, hurried script, had a date next to it. Last night at 11:12, taken, pending. There were other entries, strangers, names I could not place. Some were crossed out with heavy lines. Some were circled. Each name had a corresponding object listed. For me it said, time slip, photograph, memory fragment, pending return. Underneath, someone had scrawled, we keep what was almost lost. It was an inventory, a catalog of items the house had taken or had been entrusted with from people who'd once been there. A house that collects what leaves people, time, memory, moments. If the house keeps pieces of people, how do you get them back? And what happens if it decides to keep you, not just the things you thought you lost? I found the answer in a child's handwriting on a post-it tucked inside an old cookbook in the pantry. The note was precise and almost tender despite the context. If you want something returned, tell it the truth you hide the loudest. The house will trade listening for pieces. But be careful, the trade is never even. The house wanted confession. It wanted me to unspool my most private thing and hand it over in words. Mind games often want currency, secrets. I stood in the kitchen and thought of everything I had been saving like coins in a jar. Moments I should have said aloud. Apologies I had swallowed. Choices I had made that left other people raw. I told the recorder the truth I kept the loudest. That night years ago when I drove home drunk and someone I loved got into my car anyway, that I told myself I'd never speak about it. That I had buried the sound of their keys on the porch in a box deep in my chest. I said it into the dark like a prayer and the house listened. The baker's lamp on the countertop blew out in the same breath I finished. The recorder file recorded my voice, and then, after a breath of silence, a voice that sounded like every voice I tried to forget, whispered back the one line the notes had repeated. You were almost gone. Then everything stopped. The hush after a storm when you wait for thunder to return. For a long time I simply sat with my confession like a coin on the table, waiting for the house to count it and offer a balance. Finally, the music box in the cavity under the headboard restarted on its own. The ballerina spun. The lullaby played cleanly for the first time. The missing notes filled in. The photograph from the shoe changed its exposure. My sleeping face looked less like a victim and more like someone who'd just woken and reached for something. When I played the recorder, the file no longer had a blank segment. There was only the softest, clearest sound, someone saying my name, and then a chair scraping back. The timeline stitched itself. I suppose the house had returned something. A piece of memory, a sequence I thought I'd lost. It gave back the missing minutes, but along with them came something else. The feeling that a space inside me had been rearranged so that something new could fit there. When the house returns a thing, it does not return it the same way. You get the missing minute and, in exchange, the knowledge that you were close to vanishing. The number they call that is humiliation and the rawness of being seen and found wanting. I drove away that morning with the photograph folded in my glove compartment and the small, clockwork ballerina wrapped in a napkin. The town receded and the lighthouse blinked like a slow, fat eye. I told myself 1,000 reasonable things on the way. I'd been sleepwalking. I'd had a psychotic break. Maybe someone had staged an elaborate prank for rent money. I told myself these things like a rope over a chasm that led to my life. 2 days later, I opened the photograph again. This time, the back had a new note in that same handwriting. Thank you for visiting. We'll keep the light on for you until you come back. There are owners and then there are keepers. The house seemed to want to be both. I kept the photograph in my wallet because sometimes when I forget how fragile the world is, I like to look at the version of me that slept with a garden behind his head and remind myself that things happen to people even when they scream their names. I called the landlord eventually. He told me the house had history. People had come and gone, he said, and some had left things behind. He claimed, and I think he believed it, that the house had been a refuge for collectors and jewelers who kept trinkets under floorboards. He didn't tell me about the checklist in the basement or the notes folded into picture frames. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe the house had already moved those things back into its private drawers. A week after I left, on a rain-swept night, I woke with the distinct sensation of someone standing over my bed. My phone was off. The window was sealed. I reached for the recorder by habit and found it missing. In its place on the nightstand was the ballerina spinning slowly and another photograph, not of me this time, but of the guest room in which I slept, my face empty as sleep, my eyes open and looking directly into the lens. Behind my head in the photograph was a strip of wallpaper with that old floral pattern I'd found behind the headboard. On the back of that photo, written in that same small, hurried script, was a single line. We return what you give. We keep the rest. I turned the photograph over again, reading that line until the words blurred. The house had called me, I thought, with an invitation I accepted by staying. Maybe I was greedy for answers. Maybe I wanted to see how the world would explain itself when it seems unraveled. But there was, in that sentence, a quieter threat. they would hold on to the things you did not bring willingly to the table. I sleep now with my phone in one hand and the photograph in the other. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself whispering fragments I haven't told anyone. Like lit coins, I slide across a table. Sometimes the music box starts when no one has wound it. Sometimes when I go to the mirror, my reflection smiles a beat too late. I keep the dancer close and the photograph closer, and I tell myself I'm safer now because I understand the rules. But the truth I do not like to say aloud is simple and brittle. The house taught me something that follows you after you leave. It taught me that memory is porous, and that places keep us in pieces. It taught me that sometimes, when you think you wake up, you only wake to another bed in a house that has already learned your name. If you ask me now what the house wanted, I will tell you, it wanted to be seen. It wanted confession, and it wanted company. But if you ask me if it will ever give back everything it takes, I will only be able to answer in the same way the notes did on my pillow. You were almost gone. And then, if you press me, the last portion that keeps me from sleeping, I will tell you what I think the house kept when it returned my minutes and my photograph and gave me back the shape of my mornings. It kept patience, it kept the echo of my voice, and it kept enough of me to find me again when I am careless with my silence. So keep your secrets small. Keep your confessions honest, but only to yourself when you are sure the house across the road will not hear. Because some houses listen and then, polite as librarians, they file what they hear where you can't reach it.